Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast.
I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sansbury.
Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast. You join us for the last show of 2023, where we're taking a bit of a look back across the tumultuous last 4 years and are adopting a bit of a Christmas Carol theme in homage to one of Portsmouth's finest authors. How are you, Simon?
Well, after trying to figure out what the hell went wrong then, yeah, I'm all right. I'm, battling away. The festive period is nearly here. How's your week been, Ian?
Yes, I am still bedeviled with this Ebola or cold. It's one of the two. So yeah, I'm into week 3 and not loving it, if I'm honest. Yeah, apart from that, we are relatively poised. Long weekend, took Friday and Monday off. I've done very little, but except prepare avidly for this evening's show. I think, as regular viewers know, there has been historically, I have sat on the right of politics and Simon has sat on the left, and for most of the year we sit there being very neutral, don't we, and allowing our guests to fill the air with much more sense than we make. But we thought we might have a little bit of reflection looking back this evening.
Yeah, indeed. And taking that Christmas Carol theme, thankfully not one with songs in it, which our audience will be, I'm sure, glad of. We're looking at not so much the ghosts of Christmases past, present and future, but the votes of Christmases past, present and future. No, we're not going to run through the statistics of who voted how much and when. We're just going to give you, these were our highs and lows for the past. What we think for the present we're talking about this year, and the future is what essentially what are our hopes and fears for 2024. And then we'll round up with trying to guess when we think the general election is going to be, and in all preparation, just like our local election predictions, we're likely to be wrong.
Yeah, I think I think there's a fair chance we'll be wrong. We've not covered ourselves in glory in recent election years, but it doesn't stop us trying. So
No.
So the first period we were going to look at was politics past. So from the election of 2019 through to the end of last year. Shall we start with a low light, Simon? And look, I'm sure you have you have probably 8 pages of notes there on lowlights for that period. If I force you to settle on just one, perhaps with a couple of honourable mentions.
Well, I mean, if we're going to be particular and go from the 2019 December election, by the way, so the last time we had a December general election was in 1923, where, if memory serves, we had 4 elections in the space of 6 years. So, oh no, not another one. We hear that was it Brenda? Was that her name? That lady that was vox popped on the BBC. So,
God bless the Fixed Term Parliament Act, eh?
Well, yeah, it worked for the one parliament in which it was used in, and then it was no more. So, I guess as the prorogation happened before the general election, and Johnson being called the leader happened before the general election, my low point since the general election in 2019. Ooh, that's a tough one. You've put me on the spot there, because there was so much that happened before the general election. So I guess it's got to be the Conservative Party's fascination with re-electing a leader.
Oh wow, interesting. So we might have settled on similar themes, but in a
probably for completely different reasons.
For completely different reasons. So I have taken the only way to do politics, which is to boil my low light down to a 3-word slogan.
Uh-oh.
And my low light from the period 2019 to 2022 is conservative democracy's dead.
Oh,
Bit dark, not really in the Christmas spirit. So let me try and unpack that. So for me, there's an element of, the behaviour of Boris Johnson just became untenable. Boris Johnson, to the surprise of probably almost no one, became Boris Johnson. And in that style of believing that he was above scrutiny, above the law, above any kind of moral decency, he sort of crashed about, becoming ever more embarrassing before eventually he was done for and sent on his way. Now, at that point, as a Conservative Party member at the time, I had hoped for democracy to kick in. And there was this absurd pseudo-democratic process where runners and riders stepped forward and the parliamentary party got them down to 5. And we had little Rishi in 4th place and Liz Truss in 5th place. And so the parliamentary party then whittled the field down so that only those two remained, with the, well, you won't vote for Liz Truss, will you? Sort of message to the membership. And the membership duly voted for Liz Truss. And after, was it 56 days?
Something like that. I mean, what was the phrase that she lasted? A lettuce in Tesco lasts longer.
Yes. She was beaten by the lettuce.
Mhm.
And so then the parliamentary party came together again and said, right, this democracy doesn't seem to be working very well for us. So what we'll do is we'll give you a selection of 1 for your Conservative Party leader, because you got it wrong last time. And Rishi Sunak was foisted upon us. And I then de-used myself by immediately resigning from the Conservative Party. And it's that element of, you could argue about, well, they followed their own rules and you knew this was a risk. And if I'm honest with you, Simon, I don't think I read all the small print about the mechanics of electing a new leader and thus by default a prime minister. So for me, politically, that was, and I know I've probably broken the rules a little bit there, but we haven't really written up any rules of, and how appropriate that in talking about Boris, I don't follow them.
Yeah, I was going to say how
I don't follow the rules, but for me, it was that procession of the complete breakdown of decency and democracy within the parliamentary party that led me to walk away.
See, I find that quite interesting because my research into kind of what happened in that period, if you take as a given, obviously, Kwasi Kwarteng's and Liz Truss's disaster budget, the fantasy budget, and literally within 2 weeks having to wind that back quicker than someone trying to catch a shark on a I don't know what my analogy is there with fishing, but it was
shark fishing analogy, not strong at this point. So.
No, not strong at fishing or sharks. Yeah, and after obviously Kwasi Kwarteng was pretty much unceremoniously chucked under the bus by Liz Truss. Not a bus with some of Johnson's lies written on it though this time, so that was at least something. So the contest that took place at that time after Liz Truss giving her resignation, Penny Mordaunt put her hat back in the ring.
She did
put his hat in the ring, and somewhere along the line, very very quickly, Penny Mordaunt decided that rather than contest Rishi Sunak, she should stand aside for whatever those reasons were. I can't.
Oh no! She. So the deal was, as they whittled it down, when you got to the
that was the previous one.
No, but even with the final one, for you to proceed to a ballot, the rules were written such that you had to have 100 members of parliament backing you. So if 100 members of parliament didn't back any of the candidates, or didn't back a second candidate, then the candidate didn't have enough votes to proceed to go on to a ballot paper. So in the final two, there was Penny and Rishi, and the parliamentary party, there were only 80 odd of the parliamentary party who were prepared to back Penny. And so at that point, that was the end of the race.
I mean, my research is Wikipedia, and we know that that can't necessarily always be. I mean, it's more reliable than the Daily Mail, but it's still not necessarily 100% accurate. But that says that she withdrew rather than she was excluded. So I don't know. Either way, if you've got a vote where there's only actually one candidate, and if your electoral rules mean that you don't have a reopen nominations option, like they do in certain other parties, then basically there's no point going to the members for a vote.
No.
So I just find it interesting that the bun fight that was started with 11 candidates at the previous fight for the leadership of the Conservative Party, quickly kind of whittled down as basically people were excluded round after round. So there were lots of also rans, obviously some with a grudge and some without. I don't know. I can't help but think that really the low point is the reason why the Conservative Party are in this mess is because they elected someone who has a very, very divorced relationship with the truth, like Boris Johnson as a leader in the first place, and then followed him. So, you know, they've kind of been hoisted by their own petard, and now they're trying to find a way to actually make the impossible possible. And when they found out that wasn't possible, they then started blaming everybody else, whether that was supposedly the left-wing media, people in boats, whether it's people that eat tofu, or whatever it is. Those known left-wing conspirators in the what is it? Not the Square Mile. Is it the Square Mile? In the
city.
In the city, which are obviously against the idea of growth. So, yeah, unfortunately, the rest of us, rather than just watching with glee with popcorn, we've had to live through this and rely on this as our government. But, you know, we are where we are. The people spoke in 2019 and put this person, put that particular party into power. But unfortunately, that party didn't seem to have a way to unite its own party, let alone the country. So is your low point the election of Boris Johnson? Is that what you're almost as the trigger of it all? Yeah, because if we're excluding anything that happened before the election, it's that point. It's that, and I can see how we got to that point because the country was completely fed up with the shenanigans around Theresa May trying to get her Brexit deal to work, and the fold arms and stare brigade on both sides of the argument, basically saying, nope, we're not for moving. Basically creating a massive impasse that meant that she didn't really have any option, and then basically the Conservative Party turned on her, at least the ERG lot turned on her in order to get shot, and put that. So, but we wouldn't have been in that position if actually Johnson hadn't have run away at the first place after 2016, when David Cameron stepped down. Had he actually, I don't know, not been a coward and stood at that point to enact the thing that he'd sold to the public, then maybe we'd have all been saved all of that suffering, or maybe we'd have realised quicker that what a bodge job it was, and that oven-ready deal wasn't exactly a frozen horse lasagna. And
it isn't it. You know, again, I've playfully done the three-word slogan.
A balanced view
was it? Yeah, no. And to be fair, I guess perhaps that's your three-word slogan, the frozen horse lasagna. So as
I'll put it across
the screen. As that was probably, that was, get Brexit done, oven ready deal. Was that really the birth of the whole just boiling really complex political issues down to, if you say it often enough, then you can you can perhaps, did he fool the people? I guess it's the old we'll never know because of the.
Well, if only there was lots of video evidence of him of things being said to different people that were completely contradictory or just weren't true. The whole kind of Northern Ireland backstop, the whole kind of border between the border in the Irish Sea thing was it was in that situation because different things were told to different people and different things happened, and it was just the well, we'll get this done. But the British public had their say, were frustrated that nothing was happening because Parliament couldn't agree on how to implement a deliberately vague and very, very close vote. And Parliament couldn't even agree on saying, we're not quite sure what you mean by this. Could you tell us a bit more? And decided to, and the public decided to give the power to the person that told them that it was easy and that they could get it done. Even though obviously lots of people have found out since not. So that was kind of I would say that was my low point, but I think that's a low point for all of the country in the sense of we just deserve truth and honesty rather than this level of deception and obfuscation and governing by populist three-word slogan policies. I think we're better than that. I think we can do better than that. There are serious problems to fix, and they deserve serious solutions and serious people to enact them.
So in a serious way, allow me to invite you to get your cheery Christmas elf hat on and give me a political highlight for 19 to 22. Cool, you might need a run up here. Come on. Nearly Christmas, sleigh bells ring. Are you listening?
So so there are two things. So I'm going to cheat a little bit. So on one hand, I'm glad to see all of the results of all of the by-elections that have taken place, and a lot of those going for a political party that's close to my heart, rather than returning the incumbents, and a lot of them being basically people either being dismissed or doing a runner before basically they were strung up in Parliament, metaphorically speaking, for things. So yeah, so I think that, or actually the high for me, the good. I don't know if it's a high or it's at least a good thing of seeing that there is a sign of a return to sensible politics, or at least ministers and governments being held to account as much as they try to flop about like a halibut on a chopping board that you've just. What's with the fishing analogies? I don't know.
And to be fair, you won't. I'm not going to get a whole halibut on a chopping board. They're enormous.
Just for the halibut, okay. A trout.
Yeah.
A trout.
No, you can have a trout.
If you've got a trout flopping about on your chopping board, and I'm sorry for anybody that doesn't eat fish, and I'm never going to be able to look one in the eye again. But so at least, despite some people that obviously are strangers to the truth, trying to make it someone else's problem. I don't know. It's like trying to. It kind of gives, apart from giving the impression that that there is an element of Parliament that works in the sense that we can actually finally try to hold these people to account, or at least try to make that happen. It just has a bit of the ring of a headmaster trying to speak to a successive group of 12-year-old boys who are each trying to blame the another one of their companions or their classmates for burning down the bike sheds. It was him. What did it, sir? He was the one with the matches. No. Johnson was the one with the petrol. No. Hancock was the one with the matches. No. Oh. Cummings was the one that told us to set fire to things. You see my point?
I do see your point. So your highlight is you think that tide has started to turn.
I live in hope, because otherwise we live in really, really desperate and depressing times. So that's my hope, is that, and I don't, because at the end of the day, we can't undo those things, but hopefully we can all learn what the danger is of putting into positions of power people like that.
Marvellous. Do you want me to hit you with my next 3-word slogan?
Go on then.
vaccines, vaccines, vaccines. Now,
Okay.
I think it is the last time that I would say the government got something properly right. And at a difficult time, in a terrible backdrop, the vaccines rollout was, for me, it was it was a great success. And I think that, if I look back on it, it not only it not only had a positive health effect, but I think it did create a positive energy within the country at a time which had been very, very dark indeed. And we can argue about the nuances and the subtleties, and how the contracts were signed and how they were put together. But ultimately, at the time, the fact that the vaccines rollout went as well as it did, and again, this isn't me being one-eyed and claiming, oh, it was all down to a political party, because there were thousands of people involved, through to the spirit of the people when you turned up for that first shot, where there were dozens of volunteers who were orchestrating lines and getting people to move through, and all of that sort of social distancing stuff. So for me, politically, if I look back at that 2019 to 2022 period, I think for me that was the one piece of political, national, whateverism you want to call it, that was probably the last time we did something really, really well.
Okay. I kind of excluded stuff about the vaccine because I didn't see it as a political thing, despite certain people trying to wrap themselves in flags and claim national triumphalism about it. I can't help but feel, if I'm honest, that it went so well in spite of our politicians, not because of them.
Right.
Not a Christmas positive note, but
no. But I always thought you were going to struggle with this one. To be honest, Simon, you have a touch more of the Mr. Bumble about you than you do. You do.
Outrageous, Mr.
Absolutely,
Bumble.
Mr. Bumble. I always thought Ebenezer Scrooge got a rough deal. I thought he had many good points in his manifesto that got overlooked, but still. Right, so that brings us up to this year and politics present. So, did you want to go first with your low light?
So this year, I'm struggling with these. Why don't you go first with the low light for?
So I had a couple,
Okay.
and for me, well, it's difficult. I've got one that doesn't come out as my highlight or my low light, but actually fell into both.
Okay.
And that was the fact that the live broadcast we did from the Count in Portsmouth.
Oh, okay.
And for me, I thought, from the podcast perspective, I thought it was, it was a hell of an endeavour to undertake. Having never been to a Count before, I really enjoyed being there, picking up on the sort of the mood at the start and how that changed over time as boxes were opened, and how interesting. So a lot of the people that gave us stick about getting results wrong thought we might have been right at the start of the evening, but by the end of the evening we're declaring what idiots we were forever, coming up with our predictions. And it was like, oh, I remember seeing you at 8 o'clock and you weren't looking quite as chipper as you are now. And I think the low light for me in that is that we lost some good local councillors, and friend of the pod, Scott Pater Harris, I've always felt he was somebody who worked very hard for his residents. And when we look at that local level, there was an element of sadness for me that sometimes in local politics you can work really bloody hard and do a fantastic job, and it's not even a political thing. I felt when Steve Pitt got dumped after the sort of pandemic, there was an element of that just felt so harsh. So I think the low light for me was, again in May, it was seeing that the way in which the votes ended up going wasn't great for me personally. And my sort of secondary highlight was just being there and being part of the democratic process. So that was my those were my runners up.
Runners up.
They were the runners up. I can give you my my low light is quite personal. In that it was a dawning realization during this year, as somebody who's been interested in local politics and national politics, and we've been doing this now for crumbs. We must be coming up. Is it 5 years next year? Yeah. And it was realizing there was a moment where I realized my 3-word slogan is, nowhere to vote. In that I have got, politically, I am now homeless. And I've never felt like that. And it was just that element of, oh, right. Okay. And I'd never understood, when people had said, well, they, might as well just spoil the ballot paper. They're all to say, I ain't bothering to vote. And I sort of sat there scratching my head at a point during this year, and I couldn't even tell you exactly when it was, but it was just the case of, there's nobody I want to vote for. I don't want anybody to win. And that was quite a revelation.
Or there isn't someone you want to win.
Yeah, a little bit like you referred to the Brexit vote earlier, where Parliament was quite happy to keep telling Theresa May what they didn't want, but couldn't tell her what they did want. And that's kind of how I'm feeling.
Yeah. I mean, and that was the interesting thing. I mean, it's a bit of a diversion, but the interesting thing for me was, as part of my exhaustive research for tonight's show, I went back through, and again, using Wikipedia as my source, all of the to's and fro's of the votes, the indicative votes that fell, the number of times, 3 times they tried to vote through her deal, and it didn't pass. And then each time the opposition was pretty much being dragged screaming and kicking to a point of supporting the possibility of a second referendum. At one point, the shadow Brexit secretary said that Labour would be behind a confirmatory referendum with Remain as an option on the ballot to validate Theresa May's deal if it passed through Parliament. I mean, and that was a guy called Keir Starmer. We don't hear much from him now.
Whatever happened to him, eh? He was on Alan Titchmarsh this morning.
Was he?
He was.
Really? Okay. Okay. So, yeah, I guess it's hard because for me, 2023, a lot of the things that I think that are my low points for 2023 actually happened in 2022. Because it just feels like the Liz Truss thing only happened less than like 12 months ago, and it didn't. It was more than 12 months ago. So I guess for me, a low point was this year is seeing our government continuing to use distraction techniques and dead cat media basically to try and not provide sensible solutions to the issues of the day. And in that basis, I talk about the whole thing about the Parthenon marbles, the whole thing about the Rwanda scheme. These are all kind of nonsensical distraction techniques that are meant to kind of inflame and aggravate. And we don't need to keep looking for divide in our country. So I'm just thoroughly disappointed that a government of any flavour, whatever party they might be, that they're continuing, rather than to actually find ways to improve the country, they're just simply looking for ways to maintain power, even though they seem to be out of ideas and out of anyone roughly credible or competent to help them enact any. So yeah, I think that's a grand shame, and the changing of the repeal of the Fixed Term Parliaments Act puts the power back in the PM's hands about when to have a general election. So
Yeah, and I'm going to have a word in his show like once I've called out my date to see if we can make that happen. So that was your low light.
yeah,
And I thought that, and I can absolutely understand the chucking of, so, well, we stole the Elgin marbles fair and square, didn't we? It's like, take a 3D print of them, give the bastards back. Let's not be childish. And the people who are doing the, well, we stole them fair and square. So how many times have you been to see the Elgin marbles? Well, it's not the point, is it? Yeah, no, it really is the point, because you probably don't even know what they are. So we'll forget that nonsensical standby. Come on, hit me with your big bag of Christmas cheer positive for this year, and go.
I feel like I'm repeating myself. So the conclusion that the Partygate investigation, that wasn't this year, was it? No, so this year, not the Partygate thing. I mean, Nadine Dorries finally found out what immediate means.
So a bit of joy in the.
So having, for all intents and purposes, what appeared to be a sulk because she didn't get elevated to the House of Lords by Boris Johnson as departing PM in his honours list, which is ironic. Boris Johnson describing any honour of any description. So I'm not a fan, just in case that wasn't clear. So having said, was it back in June that she was going to resign immediately and stand down immediately, causing a by-election, because that will show that Sunak guy. And then decided to put in a Freedom of Information request to understand why she wasn't on the final list. But eventually, 78 days later, she got round to putting in her resignation. So despite saying that she was going to stand down immediately, she took 78 days to do it. So, at the end of the day, it's good to have principles, and if you want to stand by them, you should do that. But I don't know, just seems like a bit of kind of desperation to kind of hang on, just for that sake. So, in a wider sense, again, the continuing theme of by-elections showing that the existing government are not on the right message. And aren't even on their own message and don't even know what their own message is, because from one day to the next it seems to change. It's just this disarray. It's not about, for me, the frustration isn't that they are Conservatives, it's that they don't seem to know what they're doing and seem to think that the rest of us should have utter faith in their ability to do it, despite all evidence to the contrary. And I'd feel the same about that if that was a Labour government, if that was a Liberal Democrat government, or indeed as it is as a Conservative government. I just think that's awful for the country.
Yeah, and there is an element of again. Yeah. And you're not bringing the Christmas cheer to this episode, so I'm gonna have to do it for us. So my highlight, it's not really a word. Penny Mordaunt. How good was she at the King's coronation?
I mean, I didn't watch it, so I don't know.
She was brilliant, and the general consensus was just professional, passionate, and had an awful lot.
And you seem to have kind of ducked out of the connection my end. I don't know whether anyone else is seeing Ian, but I've lost Ian. He's frozen mid praise. So I understand that Portsmouth North MP Penny Mordaunt was holder of the sword, and basically had to stand there immobilized for quite a long period of time during the King's coronation. So I guess that, I mean, you could say that the coronation was also another high for the country. I have mixed views about whether we should have a constitutional monarchy, but lots of people seem to enjoy themselves, apart from the ones that were arrested for absolutely no reason whatsoever.
Bloody hell. It was Christmas Day in the workhouse. The whitewashed walls were black. We don't want your figgy pudding. You can have the bastard back. Jesus, it's not easy working this one tonight. I'll keep trying. Oh, so yes. Yeah. I never liked the monarchy anyway. Right then, Grinch.
Didn't say that. I have a lot of respect for Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
Yeah.
I think she provided a shining and magnificent example of selfless and dutiful service to the country. And as much as I struggle with the idea of an unelected head of state, the sheer fact that the monarch doesn't have to be elected actually in some ways elevated them beyond the mess that we've had over the last few years. So her loss is keenly felt. I'm sure King Charles will be fantastic, but I'm also sure he's not going to be asking me for any advice.
Unlikely. Yeah.
it's unlikely.
No, and to be fair, despite our best efforts, we've not got him lined up for the January podcast, have we?
No. We've got 2 out of 3 councillors for Charles Dickens Ward joining us, but no one regal.
No, and to be fair, I'm guessing they're not going to be great monarchists either. So moving on from the monarchy, we will look ahead now to 2024. Our hopes and fears for all the years are yada, yada, yada. Should we do fears first? Because obviously you're on an absolute mega misery trip here. I think I can pre-guess your fear for 2024.
Well, what do you think my fear for 2024 is?
I think it would be that somehow, in some kind of miraculous, it could never have been predicted, the Conservatives win their 37th general election on the bounce, and we keep them.
I've got I'm struggling. There's 3 kind of fears for me for
You can have all 3.
Can I have all 3?
Go on.
Okay,
Treat yourself.
so I'll agree. My fear would be that we have a 1992 moment and somehow the Conservatives snatch victory from the jaws of defeat, and Keir Starmer's Labour Party snatches defeat from the jaws of victory, managing to miss that open goal. That's as close to a football metaphor as you're going to get from me. My other fear would be that the collective supporters of Ukraine decide that it's no longer politically or financially expedient for them to support Ukraine in its fight against their invasion by Russia, therefore allowing Russia to succeed in their theft and brutal occupation of Ukraine. And my other fear would be that the relevant minister in the government, whichever that might be this week, eventually gets around to a decision of allowing Aquin to lay their cable through Portsmouth.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about Aquin. No, that's a great shout. I think
it's been a fight to get home the last 4 weeks.
Oh, it's
pretty much on a daily basis. There's some sort of snarl up on the traffic, and my thoughts are with anybody that's had an accident. And hopefully, anybody involved is okay, and my thoughts and sympathies with anybody that wasn't, or the families of them. But that just goes to show how easy it is to completely wreck the traffic in and around Portsmouth. And I don't drive; I'm on public transport. But being on a 700 that decides to take a merry trip halfway, it seems to go halfway to Chichester before it decides to get to Portsmouth. I'm exaggerating it a little bit. It is the gamble that I take every day. They've just got to say no to that.
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely with you. No, yeah, I think I saw a piece on Ukraine this morning, which is, I think, over in the US, there is a bit of politicking going on about whether they should still continue to support them, Ukraine, which is a disgrace. So I've got a 3-word slogan for you, as you might expect.
Good grief, no, you surprised me.
Late 70s again, and that's where, for me, it is that the general election happens next year and Labour win a landslide. Because I don't think, despite that nice Mr. Keir Starmer and his performance on Titchmarsh this morning and talking about football, and it was fascinating watch. You know, I grew up in a working class household, and then they had the people on from the Hayling Donkey Sanctuary, and he said, "Oh yes, my mother loved donkeys, and when she was poorly, we built a summer house for her at the end of the garden where she could sit in and look over the fields with the donkeys on." Now, I grew up in a working class household. I don't remember us having a summer house or fields, but still, they might be different sorts of working class. But anyway, despite how nice Mr. Starmer appears to be, I think I don't believe it's how it was when Mr. Tony Blair took office, in that the militant element of Labour had been expunged and expelled and were no longer welcome. So my fear is for a huge Labour majority, and then the folk who are there that are lefter than left take over the reins and drive us back into the whole disaster of the 1970s and unemployment rising and double-digit inflation for years. Oh, yeah, yuck. That's me.
Okay. I mean, you understand we've pretty much had that the last, and the Tories have been in power for the last 13 years. So we've pretty much had most of that anyway.
Yeah. So
I think you're right. No one is going to enter into office next year and be able to turn it around overnight.
Oh no. I know. I absolutely look where we are, and this is the piece for me, which is where, and it's partly why I'm so disillusioned with because the 13-year thing, I'm kind of a bit meh, because for me, I think that has to be broken into 10 and 4, because I actually think for 10 years we did a bloody good job, and we're fiscally responsible, and unemployment came down, and minimum wage went up, and all of those good things that happened, and some of those were Lib Dem ideas, and I thought we did pretty well. I think from 2019 onwards, where we just lived in the world of populist sound bites and threw money away like there was no tomorrow, and then threw more money away, and then tried different populist sound bites. Yeah, and global inflation, all of those things. But I do fear deeply that a massive Labour majority will see us lurch hideously left, which has never ended well anywhere.
Well, it depends on your viewpoint and your standpoint. And obviously the chucking money away thing was, aside from the throwing loads of money at your mates, and VIP lanes for PPE, was of course trying to keep the economy at least in hibernation mode while the pandemic tore through the country. So, yeah, I think that was a necessary thing.
It's only one of dozens, Simon. That's the, again, I remember being at the Liz Truss event in Portsmouth, where she stood there in person. I was only 7 feet from her when she said, "No more handouts." And we applauded the great and the good of the Conservative South End Central. That's what we wanted to hear. A return to fiscal discipline. She got elected on the Tuesday, and on Thursday signed off another £61 billion in housing subsidies that were given to everybody, irrespective of their income. So that was not what like most fiscal conservatives were keen on. And yes,
it's almost like you didn't get what you voted for. That must be really
fun enough. Yes, it is. I'm not asking you to shed any tears for me. It's a personal view. And
I guess the cancellation of the 45% tax bracket wasn't a giveaway then.
I think that's where the attempt at populism kind of is. It's where I shake my head. Is it all right if we raise inheritance tax so that it's over 3 million. Oh, that's not going to land well. No, that was never in the plans anyway. And you just think, oh, for God's sake. So, yes, my low light or my fear for next year is a massive Labour majority. So let's talk about our hopes for next year then.
A massive Labour majority.
Come on, Chuckles. What you got?
So, sorry, I don't know if you heard my.
Yes, I did.
my
I did.
back. So
Is this you announcing that you're defecting to Labour?
I'm not defecting to
Good
Labour.
news.
No.
You heard it here first.
Yeah, that's an exclusive. No, so for me, the high that there is an election and that the Tories don't win it because they're out of ideas and out of anyone competent that can deliver any of them. And I'm sorry, but the people that they've put up as ministers or indeed as prime ministers
They've not done it for you, have they?
aren't trustworthy, have picked on vulnerable people, and have not picked solutions that will work, and indeed even to their own usual party dogma, they've not picked ideas that are cheaper either, which is really, really bizarre. But there we go. So my high point will be someone other than the Conservatives winning the next general election. Now I can count. I know, shock to everybody. So that means there's either going to be a stonking Labour majority, which at the moment the polls seem to indicate there will be, or there's going to be, I mean, to be fair, there's going to have to be some sort of cataclysm for that to even reduce to the point that there would be a Labour minority government that requires someone else to help them out.
Ooh, the C word.
No, I can't imagine in a million years that's happening because it doesn't really work out for the smaller. It doesn't work out for the little spoon, does it, in a coalition? Let's be honest. I'd hope that somewhere along the line we get support from at least one of the major parties to have serious electoral reform in this country, because first past the post does not work in a country where it is not dominated by two major parties. And as we've seen over the last few years, both of the larger two parties are quite clearly made up of at least two, possibly three sub parties that should probably go their separate ways rather than pretend that they're in the same happy family, because they're really not. When you've got the likes of Ken Clarke and Andrew Bridgen in the same Conservative Party, and I know they're not anymore because Bridgen was kicked out for being a bit bat excrement about vaccines and COVID, and Ken Clarke was kicked out of the Conservative Party when Boris Johnson had his purge. So I don't know if he was allowed back in or not. I'm not sure, but yeah. So they're quite clearly not in the same stable, are they? And I'm sure as recent vacations or expulsions from the Labour Party show that as well, that that broad church is more of a broad church in a Chris Chibnall, David Tennant sort of way than a broad church as in the ecclesiastical way.
But
so
do you think there is any chance of electoral reform if Labour win a decent majority, 50 seats or more?
I think the chances are diminished because anybody that wins that handsomely is unlikely to want to rewrite the rules under which they won.
That's where I had got to.
So my hope, and possibly naively so, is that somewhere along the line, I don't know, because stranger things have happened. Because look, on December the 13th, 2019, we were all sitting here thinking it's going to take 2-3 terms for Labour to be in a point where they can even hope for a minority government. And here we are, 4 years later, where that's actually looking like an actual majority government is looking like an almost certainty. He says, touching wood. So stranger things have happened. And they certainly happened in the UK politics in the last 5 years.
Yeah, and I think there is an element of I do wonder without without COVID and without Ukraine, would we be where we are today? and no one knows that. So it's a bit of an idle speculation, but I'm not convinced we would be. So my hope is actually very similar to yours,
Okay.
which is that people can say, well, I can't believe you've gone on for years about proportional representation and now it's a load of shit. And now you're changing your tune just because it doesn't suit you. And the answer is, yeah. Do you know what? That's my prerogative.
Okay.
And
and you for owning it.
well, but there's an element of if I look at where politics is, and you started to, the people that stand in Parliament with a Conservative badge on, the vast majority of them I cannot recognise as Conservatives. I don't recognise it. I don't recognise the values they hold. I don't recognise the behaviours they exhibit. I don't recognise their approach to financial prudence. As far as I'm concerned, those three measures of what I value in conservatism don't exist in the party that are called Conservatives. And I look at it and I kind of, I muse and I reflect on the Labour. I'm sure there are strong elements on the left of the Labour Party who are looking at Sir Keir Starmer, man of the people, working class hero, with his donkey sanctuary and his knighthood, saying, well, he doesn't represent the Labour Party. And I think we're at a stage where are we in a position where binary party politics, and I know the Lib Dems are seeing, and you've got the SNP and you've got other, so I'm not being disrespectful, but principally, like you say, you can count, it's either going to be a Labour or Conservative-led government.
Yeah.
That the majority of the people who would even think about wearing that rosette don't recognise either of those parties as theirs. They don't represent their views. So I do wonder whether if we're looking to the future and we're looking at political engagement more generally, can we continue with a system where the vast majority of people are disengaged?
Yeah. Well, I think the problem that we have is that a lot of people are, and that's actually quite dangerous in a democracy, because that leaves the decisions being made by an ever and ever smaller group of people, and it makes it ever and ever more volatile. And to some degree, voters and the economy and businesses need some form of at least relative certainty of they know what they're going to get and they know what to expect. And neither of those things have been true over the last 5 years of the current government, or the current administration, or the various guises of the administration of the Conservative government. I mean, have they had more regenerations than Doctor Who in that time? I'm not sure.
Oh, I think so.
So, yeah, if only their ideas were bigger on the inside, but they're not. So, yeah, I just think that for me personally, in any situation, I think any organization, whether that's at local or national government, that has an overwhelming majority, so can literally do what the hell it likes, and telling everyone else to, quote, sit down and shut up for 4 years or 5 years. I don't think that works, because you don't take the majority of people with you, and therefore and even if you have a majority to be able to enact that, you do that for 5, 10, 15 years or whatever, and then the next lot come in and they tack it all back again, which is really, really wasteful, and really, really disruptive to the country. So, yeah, some form.
Do you want to know what three word slogan I used for that?
Go on then.
Strong and stable.
Yeah, I think strong and stable should come with a question mark or at least a caveat when it comes to the current government now.
Possibly. Right. So we're
Talking
there.
elections.
We've got that through. Talking of elections, there's basically we've got to nail our colours to the mast.
We have.
I'm
indeed.
there. I've worked it out scientifically. I'm certain of this one.
Okay. Before
Drum roll.
you say that.
Yep.
So anybody that wants to take part in our little survey of when people think that the next general election will be, there's a QR code on the top left-hand side of the screen. You can scan that, and it's just a simple online form. We just want a name so that we know who that person was, and then what week you think that general election will occur in 2024, or will it not?
Could go over to January 25, couldn't it?
Because it could go over to 2025. So please do scan that, or I'm just about to pop the link in the chat. Please do take part in that survey. So when do you reckon it's going to be then?
24th of October. Thursday, the 24th of October.
Any particular reason?
Yes. So it's a 6-week run-in, isn't it?
Now it means that it's 25 working days from the point the PM goes to the King and asks for permission to prorogue Parliament. It's nice to ask for permission to prorogue Parliament these days, that's kind of it's one of those fancy things of a modern democracy, Parliament being sovereign and all that. So 25 working days from that point, basically the general election would happen. Although it's customary, there isn't anything that legislates that it has to be on a Thursday, but we tend to have them on a Thursday.
Yeah. So that's what I've gone for. I've figured we're going to get the holidays and everything out of the way early September. Charlie, we've had enough. It's time to go for it. I don't think they will push it much later than that, because campaigning September, October, okay. Don't think anybody enjoyed campaigning through November and December, so I don't think they'll leave it that late. And I don't think they'll go in May, simply because it simply can't get any worse for them. So I think they're going to leave it later without taking it into deep midwinter.
So you think the end of October?
No, 24th of October, exactly on the day. It's going to be a Thursday. It won't be the 31st. 24th of October. Bang.
Okay, so I'm just having a look at. So if that's the case, okay, won't Parliament? So that would require it being called on the September the 19th.
Yep.
Isn't that when Parliament's recessed for conference season?
Be just before that.
So then they'll cancel conference season.
Or they'll use conference season to gird their loins, because it's a minimum, isn't it? Don't have to be.
It's just, well, okay, that's a curveball. I've not thought of that one. They could be really mischievous though, and do it like that, but a little bit, actually do it slightly earlier than that, to cause the other parties to cancel their conference seasons without notice, knowing that the Conservatives will have raised more money than the others would have done, and it would be a massive financial loss for the other parties. So that, I mean, they wouldn't do something as horrendous and dastardly as that, I'm sure. Okay. I still think it's that it's likely that it's actually going to happen at the same time as the May local elections.
Oh, that's early May as well.
I'm not being funny. The things that have been going on this week, it could be in February.
Well, could. I still don't think anyone's going to be keen to campaign. So there we go. You're saying, is it the 5th of May?
Second.
2nd of May. You're going for the 2nd of May. I'm going for the 24th of October. We will see who is right as time unfurls. We have reached the end of another year of podcasting. So we will go off into our Christmas break. Maybe you can have a large glass of eggnog or something just to cheer yourself up, and we can return all full of joy in the new year.
Indeed. Well, we'll see what joys the new year brings.
See what Father Christmas brings you. So you've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And I've been Simon Sansbury. Thanks very much for listening and watching this year. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, comment, share, give reviews, send biscuits, whatever you fancy. And please do take part in our little survey. It'd be interesting to see what everybody thinks the next general election will be. And no cheating by giving your answer like a week after it's been announced. That would be
Poor, very poor.
No. So we'll join you. You can join us in the new year. When did we say we were coming back? It was
sometime in January.
Sometime in January.
It depends how much we celebrate over Christmas.
The 14th. We're back on the 14th of January with Cal Corkery and Yinka Adeniran from Charles Dickens Ward. So we'll at least be back then. I don't think we're going to come back any earlier unless something crazy happens.
Absolutely.
So have a good one. Enjoy your 2023 celebrations. And that's it from us.